Hello and welcome to MySecTV, our Tech and Sec Weekly. This is our Tuesday afternoon episode, and today we're going to be looking at data centres and Macquarie's most recent data centre in Canberra for government data centre. And we're going to be speaking to Aiden Tudehope, the Managing Director with Macquarie Government. Then we're going to look at Australia's sort of space and launch capabilities. And we've got a lineup here, and we've been looking at specifically rotating detonation engine for space launch, and this is a commercial project and obviously some academic research in the background as well. We've got Travis Reddy, the Chief Executive Officer for DefendTex, and then we've got Dr. Adrian Pudsey, who is the Responsive Access to Space Technical Lead with RMIT University, and then also Australian Associate Professor Matthew Cleary, who's the Deputy Head Research of the School of Aerospace, Mechanical and Mechatronic Engineering with the University of Sydney. It's great to have the University of Sydney back on. We had them on a few weeks ago looking at their semiconductors research as well. For those who might be following or watching for the first time, we cover on aerospace and space, defence and national security, cybersecurity and critical technology, and cities and infrastructure. We should be streaming live on YouTube, LinkedIn and Facebook. And also we'll release the cybersecurity and technology related episodes as a podcast on the Cybersecurity Weekly podcast. This session will go for the full 60 minutes, I imagine, and it's a moderated audience Q&A. So if you're welcome to say g'day and press like and share this out amongst colleagues. Thanks for listening, and also let us know from where you are listening in the world is always of interest as well. I thought I'd throw this up because we're covering a bit of a range today. We have about 10 channels that we cover. Data centres will fall into our Chief IT channel as well, and if it's Australian related, we'll go onto the Australian Cybersecurity magazine, and we have a spaceanddefence.io channel as well, where we cover off on space and military technology. So again, both of these are on Chief IT and Space and Defence. Just yesterday, I released the podcast. Jane Lowe, our Singapore correspondent, released this with Dr. Tommaso Gagliardoni. I'm getting used to his name now. Very good on quantum security and cryptography, this particular interview. Well done to Jane on this. And it really simplified quantum computing and some of the challenges around what quantum computing will present to cybersecurity. So again, check that out. That's episode 248 on the Cybersecurity Weekly podcast. Then next Friday, we're going to be looking at smart factory technology or Industry 4.0. And we've got the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre Managing Director, Dr. Jens Gonneman from Adelaide. And I can't remember the company's name now. I don't have it in my notes in front of me, but particular application of robotics in advanced manufacturing. And just with the AMGC, we're going to be covering off a range of different projects that they've got. I looked at it yesterday. There's just too many to mention, and some of them are quite interesting and impressive. So we'll walk through some of their key projects. And then just before we stream today live, I've confirmed for this Friday, Inveris is introducing VR and DT decision timing. I can't remember what a DT stands for now, but virtual reality training for law enforcement in California. That's a $2.6 million contract with the option to go up to $5 million. They're going to be supplying 100 scenarios with branching options initially, plus 10 state-mandated ones per year of the contract. So these are obviously training police in virtual reality decision-making scenarios. That's pretty much what that project is. So that'll be next Friday, starting at 10 a.m. From our cross on Friday last week, we crossed again back to, I can't remember where Rob was, but Infinera is California-based and looking at high wavelength networking with their GX series, up to 800 gigs per wavelength. Rob gave a very good technical insights, and the GX series is being deployed in Malaysia as well in terms of these backbone cable links for telecommunications. And then we crossed to Singapore and spoke to Matthew Glitzer, Vice President for Asia Pacific with IBM Security. And we walked through the X-Force Threat Intel Index, which showed around 25% of all attacks are occurring in the APAC region. So those are both available on MySecTV and the marketplace, as well as that report. So welcome to check them out. And just briefly, also last week, last Tuesday, we did an interview with the World Economic Forum. We crossed to Switzerland and Vienna. We spoke to Algirde Pipakete from the Centre for Cybersecurity at the World Economic Forum, and also then Thomas Lutz, the Senior Technical Lead with Frequentis and the CISA Joint Undertaking for Urban Air Mobility Research Project, GOF 2.0. Again, both very good interviews and insights into what the European friends are doing. Just a couple of courses and events this week. SCADA and ICS Cybersecurity course, so check that out on the marketplace too. Early bird prices are available. And I've got 5 complimentary passes to Supercomputing Asia, which is on this week, started today. So if you want to go, let us know. And g'day to Nicholas, listening from Point Cook, Australia. Good to see. Nicholas, let us know if you want to go to Supercomputing Asia. I'll let you go. And also just being announced today, and I hope I'm not the first one, Bonnie Butland should be announcing this, but we're doing for International Women's Day next week, on the 8th of March, we're doing a Top Women in Security ASEAN Region 2021 Awards. The nominations open on the 8th of March, International Women's Day, and this follows on our Top Women in Cybersecurity and Top Women in Security Malaysia and Singapore last year. So check that out. And if you have colleagues or partners in Singapore or in the ASEAN nations, please let them know and you can nominate them. Just highlighting our Cyber War series, T-shirt series. So if you want to support our channels, just check out the T-shirts there. We've got the Advanced Persistent Threat State actors, China, Russia and India, just to start off, the panda, the bear and the tiger. They're about $20-30, wash quite well, so check them out. And just quickly to walk through our sponsors, we've got RSA is sponsoring us with the RSA Secure ID Suite. They'll be with us for a while. And just put online today, and I know it doesn't look very, very impressive, but the courses certainly are cybersecurity certification courses with ALC. So if you go to our Australian Cybersecurity Magazine or the Asia Pacific Security Magazine websites, the links are there. But I'll sort of tidy this up. But again, we've just started a campaign on these courses for ALC, so check them out. So that's pretty much it from the marketplace and what we're doing. And without further ado, I'll bring on Aiden Tudehope. I hope I didn't go too long there. Aiden, thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, Chris, thank you.
Very good. Managing Director for Macquarie Government, and you've just opened up a brand new data centre in Canberra. Congratulations first, because it's always nice to open up a new building. How did it go? Maybe we'll talk us through the overall project, and then kind of, because Macquarie is quite a large beast in itself. So how does this fit into the business overall for you?
Yeah, no, thank you, Chris. Absolutely delighted to. So let me bring alive what we're doing down in Canberra. Last month, we completed the $17 million expansion to our data centre campus in Fairburn, which is adjacent to the airport in Canberra. It's a Tier 4 data centre that is the highest level of resiliency that you can make or embed into the design of a data centre. And it's zoned for SCEC Zone 5 ready, which means it can handle right through to government top secret information. Now, this investment is on an existing data centre campus that we first started now about 10 years ago, and it is all about supporting the Commonwealth's drive around securing their data and securing their data in sovereign data centres. There's really, Chris, a very increasing focus on making sure that government data sets stay onshore but are in data centres owned and operated by Australian entities.
Well, you just on that quickly, I mean, this is obviously government, but this is purely going to be Australian data. I mean, you could sort of hold foreign data that's, foreign governments, if it's government approved. It's not limited to the data it can hold, but obviously it's designed for government sovereign data.
Look, the Australian government has complete flexibility as to what data they choose to put in there. Obviously, it's Canberra-based, right? So, it is designed for the Commonwealth. I'm going to suggest that, there isn't a huge market in Canberra outside the Commonwealth needs, and that's what it's been designed for.
And maybe just talk us through your sort of suite of data centres. How does this fit into the data centre portfolio that you're building?
Yeah, so this the one in Canberra is IntelliCentre 5 bunker, as the number 5 suggests. There's 4 before it. They are spread across Sydney and in Canberra. The main development we're having outside the one I've just referred to in Canberra is IntelliCentre 3 East. That's on our Macquarie Park data centre campus, and that development is due for completion this month, March. That's an $85 million build, and it's building that campus out to be 43 megawatts. So a very significant investment in data centre capacity across the Sydney and Canberra markets.
And have you got others in construction?
They're the two right now.
Yeah.
We're expecting that we will start to build out further plans, because if I look at that Sydney one, a very sizable portion of what we are completing this month is already been sold. And we announced a very significant deal with a Fortune 500 company just before Christmas. So we will get our skates on and build out the plans for future expansions, but nothing announced at this point.
How's the general market, and how do you approach this market? It is an interesting one in terms of you try to sell the data. It's like real estate in a way. You're trying to sell the space first before you start building, or do you kind of, a bit like an apartment building where you kind of design it, prepare it, you've got the land, and then you go off and sell it? What's the process there, and how challenging is that to balance as you go through the project?
Yeah, look, I think balance is the right word. I mean, rarely does someone get to have their data center materially sold before they complete. That was a particularly good position for our business. Look, I think what gives me confidence is that this is part of a mega trend around adoption of cloud computing. Yeah. We all know that from our personal lives. We know that from our work environments. And we talk about the move to the cloud. The cloud resides somewhere. And increasingly, particularly for the Commonwealth, there is a desire for that cloud to reside in Australia and only subject to Australian jurisdiction. That's what gives us confidence that what we're building here in Australia will have demand and customers for when it is completed. We've been doing data centres for for now just on 20 years. Right. So there's track record there and experience in what the customer wants. So when we listen to the customer, we actually then end up building a product that is sought after.
And what's your activities in the region outside of Australia?
Our focus is very much here in Australia. For the Commonwealth, we do cybersecurity, cloud and co-location for 42% of the Commonwealth. So that alone keeps us super, super busy.
And maybe just talk us through Macquarie Telecom and how this all fits to the larger business. As you say, cybersecurity and a whole range of other technologies. You do seem to be sort of not so much segregated, but you've created different business units to deal with that. Is there a point where you cross over?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Chris. So we're part of the Macquarie Telecom Group. We're ASX listed, $1 billion, ASX top 300 by capitalisation. We have 500 employees around the country, and we're to 4 business units. There's a telecom part of the business, cloud services, data centres, and what we do for government. They do all interrelate with each other. At the end of the day, a data centre is meaningless without connectivity. True. So having telecom and data centres makes sense. And of course, a secure data centre is needed, and that feeds very well into what we're doing on the cyber security piece and what we're doing for the Commonwealth. So they're all very much complementary and with all different purposes, but very much complementary in what they bring to the table with our customers.
Well, I suppose that's a question of how much, because looking at the tier 4 and then you've got SCEC Zone 5, so you need SCEC consultants. I imagine Macquarie's got its own SCEC consultants. How much internal do you build this and your design teams in terms of the security approach to this as well? Like, do you need to go outside? Or I've got a number here. There was 150 NV1 government cleared engineers involved in this data center project. How much is that one business servicing the other? Yeah,
so we've got 150 NV1 cleared engineers in our business, and they're very much focused on that government piece. When it comes to building a data centre, all data centres go to best of breed around the world. We took a particularly strong focus in where we could leverage local content. We've just lived through a really challenging period with COVID. and an economic recession, and I go, whatever we could do where we could support local business to build this data centre, as well as the one in Sydney, we leveraged local skills. But it is very much a collaborative effort. We're not builders, so we obviously have head builders, nor do we make diesel drops and batteries and other technologies, so we do obviously leverage that technology. What we bring to the equation is understanding the customer, Chris, and we also bring to the table of, we know how to operationalise a data centre, how to run it, how to tune it, and how to get the most out of it when it comes to efficiency and the like.
One final question I have is, how much new tech are you seeing coming into the data center business? Because I mentioned Supercomputing Asia before, and there's a lot around sort of the data centers there, and almost the introduction of robotics into data centers as well. How much sort of new tech are you seeing coming into the data center sort of environment?
Yeah, I look over the last 20 years of building data centers, and I sort of answer that question in Chris and saying, how does the data center look that we built 20 years ago? How does that look different from the one that we're building today? Yeah. And the answer is the fundamentals are still there. The underlying drive is to improve the efficiency of a data center. No different from, say, the automotive industry. How do I get the fuel consumption down? And that applies in data centers. And so that's the line data center build. And that with the needs of the customers, where computers are shrinking in size, not necessarily shrinking in power consumption, but certainly in size. What does that mean in aggregate then is you've got higher density in every rack, which then adds extra complications. But it also means that when you get that efficiency to improve, it has a really big bearing, because there's more and more servers, more and more cloud applications being put into these data centers. So overarching consistent trend about better efficiency across the board.
Yeah, particularly power and heat control, right? And that type of thing. And one of the other key challenges is the future-proofing this and kind of modularizing. Do you find you modularize it a bit, where you can sort of change those racks over? The fundamental infrastructure of the DCs there, the security and all of that type of thing should remain relatively current, but it's really sort of that processing technology and the power technology that you might need to upgrade down the track, and you just want to be able to modularize, pull that in and pull it out and then put it back in?
Yeah, so by being a tier 4 data center means that you can pull off any piece of infrastructure and upgrade it, patch it, replace it, etc. So through the life cycle, that's happening all the time, right? You know, there's electronics and there's mechanics here, like in any other industry, if I use that automotive example again, things break, things need to be maintained. So it is precision engineering, and it needs to be able to have a life cycle that well and truly outlives any one element. So that's part of running a data center. It also means that there is value from scale in this business, which is why you're seeing, you know, a competitive market where there are a reasonable number of data center players there, all of reasonably large scale. You don't have to be the largest, but you do need to have a degree of scale in order to have that efficiency of maintenance and lifecycle management.
Nice. And last question, in terms of, this is a government-built data center, are you managing that as a client? And so it's an agency, direct to a government agency, or is this going to be managed at the government level and they'll do with it as they please in terms of who uses it?
So it's very much our data center. We will sell it to multiple agencies at either a rack, a cage, a data hall level. And so if I look at, for example, our existing data center that's in Canberra, IC4, that has many, in fact, it has probably 42% of the Commonwealth in that facility, either through our cybersecurity offering, our cloud offering, or buying data center capacity. So the same will apply now with IntelliCenter 5. It's multi-agency, particularly focused on the security, the cybersecurity apps and workloads, particularly focused on those data sets that need to reside and remain sovereign here in Australia.
Very good. Well, look, I've put a couple of photos up there. Data centers, they're not that exciting to actually look at. They're like looking at a prison for some people. It's like, okay, only the security people will be like, okay, that looks cool. But look, very, very interesting. Like I said, we've covered data centers quite a bit, but I think it's always nice to see a new one opened up in Canberra, $17 million from Macquarie Government and Macquarie. Is it Macquarie Data Centers? Is the business group, isn't it?
Is the group that builds the data centers, yes, Chris.
Very good. Well, look, thank you so much, Aiden. I do appreciate that. It's great having you on. Aiden Tudehope, the Managing Director with Macquarie. Do appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Great to be here.
Good on you, mate. I'll put you backstage. Okay, very good. Like I said, I get excited by a security fence and walking through. So if you haven't been to a data center, it's worth checking it out, but you only need to go to one because they're all technically built the same. As Ada mentioned, it's down to the security. Okay, so let's move over to our space chat and no video. Okay, Gary, sorry about that, mate. I don't know what's happening. Apparently we don't have a video on Facebook. You should have. If you go to the Asia Pacific Security Magazine, but I'll check that out briefly. Otherwise, come over to YouTube, Gary. Let me just get rid of our tab. Now, we're going to move into space, and I thought I'd just throw these up as a memory. Our last episodes for 2020 looked at Space 2.0, Industry Insights number 1 and number 2. Where we had Lloyd Damp, CEO with Southern Launch, and James Powell from New Zealand, co-founder of Dawn Aerospace. And then we spoke to Peter Kinney, head of sales at Gilmore Space Technologies, and Stefan Moroni, country manager with MathsWorks. So you can check those episodes out, and they're on MySecTV, obviously. So this is a nice, I think this is our first space one that we've done for the year that I can recall anyway. We've done a lot of episodes, and this follows on some rotating detonation engine for space launch, a media release that came out. And we're going to be joined by, I'll introduce them as I bring them on. We've got Associate Professor Matthew Cleary, Deputy Head Research of the School of Aerospace, Mechanical and Mechatronic Engineering from the University of Sydney. Matthew, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Very good. And together we've got Travis Reddy there on the right, Chief Executive Officer with DefendTex, and Dr. Adrian Pudsey, Responsive Access to Space Technical Lead, RMIT University. Adrian, thanks for joining us. So it's always, sometimes I always highlight people with a real job, Adrian and Matthew. Sometimes you just got to add that full title there. I like, that's why I just like editor. Now I've got some slides to share, and let me just bring this over. So maybe we're going to start off with, beg your pardon, 1 second. So Travis, you're going to kick us off, and this is the actual image here. We're going to walk through some slide decks, but in fact, maybe Travis, let's start us off with the project and DefendTex and where DefendTex has come from, and we'll dive into this.
Yeah, thanks. So DefendTex is a defence research and development organisation, around 6 years. Over that time, we've grown to about 86 odd staff. And our real success has come from our collaboration with the university sector. We currently employ around 130 researchers across 24 universities, and 2 of our good collaborators are here today in the form of RMIT and the University of Sydney. We've been fortunate in that the Department of Industry and Science has assisted us on this particular project through a CRCP, or a Collaborative Research Centre project. And a CRCP differs from a standard CRC in that it has to be industry-driven. It has to result in a commercial outcome in a 3-year time frame. So a very small, discrete project that has to have both a technical challenge and some core science that needs to be done, as well as a commercial outcome that comes through it. When we looked at the kind of project that we wanted to put into, and this is our 3rd CRCP, previously we've been successful in developing a hydrocarbon fuel system for hypersonic flight and for 3D printed energetics, specifically a 3D printed solid rocket booster. But in this particular case, we were interested in the responsive access to space problem. How is it that we can get a payload into orbit in a very short time? And with the defence threats that we have running through our organisation, we're particularly interested in the geopolitical environment where our space-based assets may cease to operate in a short period of time and create strategic surprise or strategic opportunity for our adversaries. and how can we go about creating a sovereign capability to fill that gap. And in so doing, how can we bring the rest of the space industry along with us on that journey? And in particular, academia. They do a lot of really good space research, but they suffer from the problem of not being able to get that research into orbit in a cost-effective way. And if they can get it into orbit, they end up in an orbit they don't want to be in. So we're looking at those smaller payloads, being able to get them up quickly and in a very cost-effective method. The methodology behind that was, if we take a conventional system, we can maybe tweak that and get a couple of percentage points gain, but we're ultimately going to get a conventional outcome. So we wanted to rethink the problem and come up with an unconventional approach to how we get into orbit. And that's where the concept of the rotating detonation engine came into play. And I'll probably hand over to Adrian at this point to tell you about what a rotating detonation engine actually is.
Because I knew straight away. Maybe just a quick question. Exactly. It's like, okay, the DefendTex, how long have you guys been around?
This is year number 6.
Year number 6. Okay. And I suppose I take it there's links back there to defence. Where was the sort of the premise of DefendTex came from? Because it sounds like you've kind of growing and you've got a lot of projects on already. What was your premise?
So the premise here, being an ex-defence member myself, was all around asymmetric warfare, and that's the area we want to concentrate in. As you'll be well aware, Australia has a very small military force. We have a technological edge, and our potential adversaries outnumber us significantly and outspend us in some cases. So we're looking at how we can use technology to generate asymmetric combat power. And we've achieved that through a range of different projects, such as loitering munitions, so small low-cost drones that fire out of a grenade launcher, to trusted autonomous systems, so there's a very large number of projects.
Exactly.
I want to keep in the space context of what we're talking now, without drifting into the defence stuff too much. But we got our start back in 2016 through a process called Army Innovation Day, where at the time Major General Kath Tui was running Army Innovation Day, which was an opportunity for companies to bring new ideas to Army, kind of like a Shark Tank environment. We pitched that idea of the Drone 40, and that was taken up by Army at the time. Some seed money was given, we've developed it through, and now it's in service with the UK Army, and it's also in the US DoD. So it's been a success story. And we hope that the detonation engine and our space work will be a similar success story.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that links, and we mentioned Lloyd there, former defence as well. So, you know, sort of that link between defence capability building, sovereignty, that's the link between our interviews today, is that keyword of sovereignty from Macquarie's data centre in in Canberra for government. And we're trying to build that here. And so Australia is trying to build a sovereign launch capability, correct?
Yeah, look, I think the Australian government's message has been very clear, that they've identified a number of key strategic priorities where they want sovereign capability. Defence is one of them, and space is another. The raising of the Australian Space Agency, I guess, is a testament to the seriousness that they're assigning to that. The recent inclusion of space is one of the critical manufacturing components in the in the manufacturing modernisation initiative that they're running now. I think there's $130 million available to assist manufacturing in space. It is a good indication of the seriousness that the government seems to have applied to the sector at last.
Yep, and I mentioned this Friday, we're speaking to the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre in Adelaide as well. So many projects, but there's quite a number there with space related. So let's move through. Adrian, are you going to walk us through the slide deck?
Yeah, if you could just bring up the first slide, please.
Yeah, let's see what we've got. What I'll do is I'll make it larger, and let me just work this out, and then we should be able to. Just one moment. That's it. Let me just get rid of that. Okay, so talk us through the rotating detonation engine.
Sure. So conventional engines, and probably most people's, I guess, experience of combustion is a process called deflagration. And so this is it can be rapid, but it's a subsonic process. It's been around for, it's it's really the basis of pretty much every combustion engine that we have today. Rocket engines, gas turbine engines, piston engines, everything that you can think of that's in service is based around this deflagration process. It turns out, however, that under certain circumstances, certain conditions, that this slow combustion process can transition into something called a detonation wave. And that detonation process is much faster. And basically the combustion wave will travel through the mixture at very, very high speeds, in excess of 2.5 kilometers per second. And what we can get from this is a much greater extraction of energy and also work out of the products, sorry, of the fuel. And probably one of the most well-known concepts that use this is a pulsed detonation engine. It's been around for a while. And in a PDE, it's basically a really long tube. You fill that full of fuel and oxidizer and ignite it, and it will rapidly detonate and send some thrust out of the back for a very short time. And then you have the issue of refilling that with more fuel and oxidizer and firing it again. So it's not a very efficient process. You're only getting a very short time. So one way to fix that is the rotating detonation engine as we have up there. And the reason it's better is because it's continuous. And if you look at that image, which is actually one of our, a representative of one of our 3D printed engines that we will be testing soon, you'll see that basically it's an annulus or a ring-shaped combustor. You should be able to see that there, and there's also that lower image. So it's a ring-shaped combustor. You have an outer and an inner body, and all the magic happens in the gap between them. So at one end, we have an ejector ring, very, very similar to a conventional rocket. Then there's the combustor, and then on the far left is a nozzle, which again is fairly standard in a rocket engine. And basically the way that it works is if you inject fuel and oxidizer at exactly the right proportions in the right way, if the dimensions are just about right, then a detonation will actually travel around that ring continuously as long as you can feed it with fuel. So that's the basic principle. You can use this for other propulsion systems, so ramjet, high-speed flight. You can use it for gas turbine engines, are also something that's being looked into for flight and for ground power generation. So there's a lot of applications there. And I think the key point for us is that it's a next generation technology. It really is, it's a leap ahead over conventional rockets. And as Travis said before, in conventional sense, you know, we're always looking for this 1 or 2%, maybe 3% gain at great cost. What the RDE gives us is possibly 10, 15 or higher percentage gain in performance and efficiency, which is significant. Other benefits include the high power density, so you can pack these engines into a very small space as compared to normal rockets. And also the pressure feed requirements are a lot less. So we can potentially do away with big heavy turbo pumps and either run much smaller turbo pumps or possibly even not have them at all. So there's a lot of advantages in the engine design, and that's really why I guess we're looking at this as the next generation.
There's a couple of questions. One is you're 3D printing this, advanced manufacturing?
That's right. So our first engine that you'll probably see in the picture next was conventionally manufactured, and we've now moved to advanced manufacturing with 3D printing, and our next engine is fully 3D printed.
And has that adapted the design as well? The fact that you can now print this off, and I take it you print it as one, or do you print still putting it into components?
At this stage, it's components, but in the end, we hope to print as a single piece. Certainly, it's made a big change to our design. We can do things that are impossible to do with conventional manufacturing.
And the other one was, how much control over the detonation do you have, both the power but also the duration of that detonation?
So in terms of the power, you can throttle these. The stability of the detonation is certainly one of the issues that need to be overcome. But you can throttle them up, and you end up with more detonation waves. So the more fuel and oxidizer you pump in, the more waves you can produce and more thrust. In terms of the duration, we're at fairly short duration at the moment because one of the other major issues is the heat. So these engines get very hot very quickly, and if you don't actively cool them, you've probably got 1, maybe 2 seconds before they start disintegrating. So that's one aspect that we're looking at the moment.
Cool. Okay, next slide. So this is it in operation.
Yep, I'll probably hand this.
Yeah, that's right. So as part of this this process, we've built up here a ground test facility for the rotating detonation engine. They're only one of its kind in the country. There's only a handful of them in the world. And this particular facility, I think, is a testament to the way that the project has been run and the success that we've achieved, in that it's a true industry university collaboration. So the facility itself is located on our premises. It's very difficult to build these kind of facilities within a university, just based on the density of students and the risk management policies that they have in place.
Yeah, I get it.
Staffed here by RMIT staff in conjunction with some DefendTex staff, and those staff run hand in hand. So for all intents and purposes, the RMIT research team is here on a daily basis, running engine test after engine test after engine test. Fully instrumented, as I say, supporting our additive manufacturing components of the engine. And what it's been allowing us to do is to build up expertise, not only in the design and fabrication of the engine, but in the way those engine tests are conducted, the links back to the work that we did in hypersonics, and the ability to bring those researchers through. One of the issues you have in research is you might do a 3-year postdoc, and then after that, you need to go off and find something else to do so that you can keep that expertise. But having these follow-on projects that are following a logical course allows those researchers to build those skills, apply them in a practical way, and then continue that journey through, hopefully all the way through to a TRL-9 system that reaches orbit. And
this is linked to another project as well, is it? Is this, and maybe where did this research come from? Is this from an individual researcher, or was it sort of industry requested or defence requested?
So it all started with a journey into hypersonics back in 2016, where we were looking. Australia has a very rich history in hypersonic flight through the HiFi program. Indeed, we're one of the handful of countries that have achieved hypersonic flight. Just as within space flight, I think we were the 7th country in the world to launch a satellite, the only 3rd country in the world to launch a satellite from our own territory. So Australia has a very proud history of being able to take early technology. So we're looking at hypersonics and trying to work out how we could do it better, and that's where the concept of a hydrocarbon fuel system for hypersonic flight came to be. Because most hypersonic flight is done with hydrogen. It's not the most efficient way to do it, but it's the simplest way to do it because you can model it very easily. We'll hear about modeling in a moment. So we want to take that to the next level, and through that process, we learn a lot about the combustion issues, a lot about the heat management. And then we started thinking about were there other ways to achieve hypersonic flight, that is, flight greater than the speed of Mach 5. Typically, it's done with a scramjet or a boost glide environment. You send something up high into the atmosphere and let it glide down and pick up speed. But again, if we want a different outcome, we need to think about the problem differently. So we started looking at alternative propulsion methods that may enable us to achieve that hypersonic flight. And that's where the concept of the RDE was born. We didn't invent the RDE, but we decided to rethink the way to manufacture it, rethink the way to test it, and more importantly, rethink the way to use it. And that's
so this technically could be launched, I say, on a supersonic plane side of thing, and then fire and detonate and give you hypersonic. Correct. Right, got it. Okay, so it's not necessarily the base of a rocket for a rocket to launch off, but it could be used for that as well.
Yeah, look, it's an engine. An engine can be used for many things. It can be used to go horizontally, it can be used to go vertically, it can be used to produce power. It has very different modes that it can be utilised in. Being a defence company, we're obviously interested in all modes of propulsion.
Yeah, and how much control would you have over its size? Does it have to be a certain size, or you could not miniaturize it, but you could bring it down to quite a small size?
Engines at the moment go all the way down to 100 millimetre. So quite a small engine. We haven't gone below that yet, but the theory scales. Talk to the scaling.
Sure, there is a lower limit to the size for technical reasons associated with the detonation process, and of course it depends on what fuel you use and what oxidizer you use. In some cases, you're limited to very large sizes, so there is a size limit.
But at 100, it obviously has utility.
Yeah, I'm thinking of like the drone or, unmanned type system. Okay, well, look, I'll bring up this one. This is probably the most exciting one. They're all good, but let me just bring this one up. Okay, talk us through this one. This is it at detonation, obviously.
Yeah, this one's just here as a pretty picture. So all the orange one, all the orange pictures there you see are at the startup process right at the beginning with a high-speed camera. So that very quickly becomes quite a nice, clean blue flame. But I guess the main point is there you can clearly see the annulus, that ring-shaped combustor in those upper images. This particular engine, we're not measuring thrust or anything like that, so there's no nozzle as compared to what you saw in the last image. This is just exhausting straight out. So it was one of the earlier tests.
So this is testing our safety and our control systems.
Right. How much data are you collecting during the process in this as well? You got sensors in there and...
I think we need that Macquarie data centre pretty soon.
Very good. Okay. Next slide.
So from here we move into next slide, please.
Yeah, sorry.
We
Okay,
move
and I'll play this. Yeah.
Component, and I'll hand over to the University of Sydney.
Yeah. So at the University of Sydney, our contribution to this project has been on modelling the rotating detonation engine. The image you see here is what we call a numerical Schlieren. So it's showing the gradients of density. And you can very clearly see, and in fact, if you go to the next image, Chris, you can see it even in more detail.
Yeah.
You can very clearly see the structure of a detonation wave. So where we have the strongly black part of the image towards the right-hand side at the bottom, there's a vertical wave there. That's the detonation wave. And we get very sharp pressure rise and temperature rise across that. And then downstream behind that wave to the left of it, we can clearly see the transverse pressure waves, which move up and down the detonation wave on the back side of it. So in order to produce images like this is really a pretty picture, but it certainly shows us what the structure of the process looks like inside a rotating detonation engine. And we're using a method known as computational fluid dynamics, or CFD, which is an engineering approach to solve the governing equations of gas flow, or liquid flow, but in this case it's gas flow inside the engine, using computers and numerical methods. So the reason we need to take a computational fluid dynamics approach is that the governing equations for the transport of things like momentum and energy are very complex partial differential equations. And they can't be solved by hand or analytically. Instead, we have to obtain a numerical or a computational solution to those equations. But what it does is it provides us with very detailed information. Of course, it's a prediction, but it's a very detailed prediction of the processes happening inside the rotating detonation engine. So we can examine properties of the flow, and the next image shows a picture of temperature inside. This is now an annular rotating detonation engine. The previous images were flattened out straight.
Yeah.
This is showing the temperature. Okay, but we can also look at other things. But we can see here the high temperature regions, which are in the orange or red color, and then the low temperature regions, which are blue, where the fuel and the oxidizer enter the combustor. So we can look at this image or other things, and we can extract very detailed diagnostic information about what is happening inside an RDE, and look at things that are not possible to extract experimentally, because the conditions inside an RDE are very, very extreme, and only so many experimental data points can be extracted. So CFD, computational fluid dynamics, allows us to examine this in much more detail. And once it's been validated against the experimental data that is being produced, then we can use CFD for future optimization and improved designs.
What type of, and you've got I can't go back to your title, but what type of research and then the engineering is involved in this part? Because I imagine it's very multidisciplinary. How many researchers have you got on this?
So at the University of Sydney, working on this project, we have 3 academics. So myself, Ben Thornber and Dries Verstraete. So we specialise in slightly different things. And then we have a postdoctoral researcher, Sebastian Galindo Lopez, and 2 postgraduate students.
Right. And is there international collaboration in this? Is a highly specialised field. Are you collaborating internationally as well?
So at the moment, there's 17 researchers working on the project and 3 PhDs. Our international partner is University der Bundeswehr, which is a German research organisation which has close ties to DLR, and have brought in some expertise there as well. I'll talk about what Bundeswehr does.
Yeah, well, they're basically doing modelling as well and looking at the physics around the injection. So in this particular engine, one of the most difficult aspects is the injection and getting that working properly. If you don't get that right, then the engine won't work. So they're using a different type of CFD to what Matt just discussed there, more of an engineering approach, I guess, to quickly evaluate ideas and see how we can improve that injection.
Very good. And how much, other than its sort of application, is this research commercialised or potential for commercialisation in its own right, in terms of sort of rotating RDEs in their own right? Is this sort of groundbreaking research and what could be applied across sort of the RDE sector?
Look, 100%. The outcome of this is an engine, and as I mentioned before, an engine can be used for many things, and that engine will be a product in its own right. But its real value, its real utility will come when we integrate that into a flight system, and that's the next phase of work.
And how much, when I see figures like this particular sort of the CFD and the sort of the mapping being done, how much machine learning is involved in this and sort of the advanced computational processing to learn from this and recognise what is actually happening? I imagine there's some advances being made there as well. Sure.
So far we haven't used any machine learning for this. It's all computational fluid dynamics. What you do is you take your physical geometry, which is the annular combustor, and you break it up into a mesh containing millions and millions of points, and you solve the equations of motion on those points. And we use supercomputing facilities to solve this. So we divide the domain up into subdomains, and each one of those is solved on a different processor. And then there is communication between the processors for the transport of information, momentum and energy and so on. So these particular simulations, depending on the resolution of the grid, but they can cost up to a million CPU hours or more.
Wow, nice.
Machine learning would allow us, I suppose it would come in another phase, would allow us to perhaps reduce the demand on the resolution and the information at the smaller scales, which we are not resolving now, could be approximated based on a training phase that has produced data that can be accessed in the simulation phase.
Okay, well, look, it's a fascinating area, and I'm a layperson in this in terms of sort of the advanced sort of technology being used. What's the project sort of life cycle, the research? Is there a sort of a project life cycle on this, and where you would expect it to be applied?
Yeah, so the funding for this particular phase finishes at the end of this year. And by the end of this year, we expect that the engine will be running for extended periods of time once the active cooling system is operational. And we're now looking at our opportunities for follow-on funding, both through the Department of Industry as well as Department of Defence. Great.
Well, I suppose let's finish it off with a call to action. Is there a specific call to action? You want some market awareness around this, as you say, but yeah, what would be your sort of final message, and what would you like to see?
My final message is that there is a lot of good science happening in Australia, but we're failing to commercialise that good science and to keep a sovereign capability. Everything here is about sovereign capability. There's no point developing things to sell it off to the Americans or the Chinese or whoever else is the highest bidder. You know, if we can't retain talent in Australia, if we can't convert people from, you know, their PhDs and give them a job to move into, if we can't continue to fund good research that leads into new breakthroughs, then we're wasting our time. And this is a good opportunity where the Department of Industry has provided a mechanism to give us the opportunity to put meat behind that story, to actually, you know, put our best foot forward, to create a project, to deliver a commercial outcome and see that all the way through to commercial success, so that we can take the money that's raised from that, reinvest it back into the fundamental research and keep that cycle of innovation running.
I think that's important. Obviously, from RMIT and the University of Sydney, you're doing some advanced research, and it keeps your researchers here, right? You're doing something interesting enough to keep them here.
Absolutely.
Yep, that's right.
Just maybe one final message from the University of Sydney. How does this fit in? Because we looked at the sort of the semiconductors, and again, maybe just talk us through the school. You're head of school in terms of research. What's your scale at the moment in terms of your researchers across the school?
Yeah, so we've got aerospace, mechanical, and mechatronic engineering, and we have various sort of subgroups within that. So we have the mechatronics, which is, you know, robotics, and we have the Australian Centre for Field Robotics. So they're looking at automation and robotic applications in things as like agriculture, driverless cars, and robotic surgery. And then we have the aerospace department. So traditional aeronautical engineering, but also space engineering. And then in mechanical engineering, we have the traditional mechanical engineering disciplines. I'm from the combustion group within mechanical engineering, but we also have advanced materials design and a few other smaller areas.
Yeah, and RMIT.
Sorry, what's the question?
Just the size of your school in terms of the research and the number of researchers you've got in this space, but not just in sort of space-related fields, but advanced technology.
Well, in the propulsion field, we're actually a really small group. Right. There's only a couple of us. RMIT is really well known for materials work, and they do that with the DST quite a lot. There's the mechanical area, automotive, and advanced manufacturing. So we have one of the largest advanced manufacturing precincts in Australia for additive manufacturing specifically. So I'd say definitely advanced manufacturing and materials is our biggest area, and hopefully soon propulsion.
And what RMIT is, you know, they've been with us on every CRCP that we've done to date. They've been a very hands-on, practical university. And you do run the risk sometimes of being research for research's sake. So that practical aspects of what we found at RMIT and the applied aspects of what we found at University of Sydney, to be able to take that deep knowledge and apply to a real-world problem is where the value's been.
Well, look, maybe it's just the people who we speak to, but I'm always seeing that strong link between academics and industry coming together now. That seems to be a major drive, certainly over the last sort of 5 years, but even up to the last sort of 2 to 3 years. And I think the government's innovation sort of growth centres across different industries has also helped and they've pumped a bit of money. So it's always good to see. And thank you very much for your time as well and explaining this fascinating research. And hopefully we'll look up one day and see an RDE flying overhead. That's the idea, I suppose. So look, on that note, and we're going to finish right on time today, we've just been joined by Travis Reddy, the CEO for DefendTex, Dr. Adrian Pudsey, and Project Technical Lead at RMIT University, and Associate Professor Matthew Cleary, Deputy Head Research of the School of Aerospace, Mechanical and Mechatronic. Sorry, I was reading it wrong before, engineering at the University of Sydney. Gents, thank you so much for your time. It is linked on our Space and Defence chapter, and I'll put that in the show notes as well in terms of if you want to read more and reach out to these gents. So thank you very much for your time. I'll put you backstage.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. And Aiden, I appreciate you hanging back there. You're welcome to go on for your day, and I'm just going to finish off. So thank you very much. I think you were interested in that anyway, right? Good on you. Thank you. Okay, so that's it. Our data center with Macquarie episode and our space capability with RMIT, University of Sydney and DefendTex. just to finish off, Aiden might like this one too. From Global Data, just came out this afternoon. Australia's mobile services market to grow at 15.4% calendar annual growth rate over the next 5 years through to 2025, and compound annual growth of 15.4% to reach 14.9 billion by 2025. With the, let me just increase that so we can read it. 5G obviously being the major driver there, but 4G still hanging around for the next 5 years. But you know, considering here we are, 2021, you're looking at about a threefold increase of 5G over that period, according to Global Data Technology Intelligence Centre. So thanks to Global Data for that. And that's pretty much it from us on the MySecTV TV. On Friday, we'll be back at 10 o'clock on Friday morning for our live stream, looking at Industry 4.0, Smart Factory Technology with Dr. Jens Goneman, Managing Director with the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre. And I mentioned we're going to also be joined by Inveris. I think they're in San Francisco somewhere, looking at the virtual reality decision. I'll have to find what T stands for, decision-making virtual reality for law enforcement training with the state of California, their first customer, looking at 100 scenarios with branching options initially, plus 10 state-mandated ones per year of the contract. Should be an interesting one to watch. If you want to support the channel, please check out our Cyber War Series T-shirts and our merchandise on MySecTV TV. Other than that, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you on Friday.